In part one of this series, I went into explaining the overall truth surrounding the Hebrew Israelites. I discussed the overall truth, biblically and academically, about who the Negroes scattered around the world truly are. Now, also in that, I explained a great deal about the controversies that surround the Hebrew Israelites and the truth that they represent. I explained that they were used as a sort of warning sign to prevent the masses from accepting the biblical truth of the scriptures and what it is our Father is planning to truly do in the last days. As he has done with many different agendas, Satan created this sect of people to proactively be a representation of the truth that our Father will be doing in the last days. And what Satan did was, because people only saw these groups as the sign that represented this truth, they would not accept the full truth and they would turn away from it. In that video, I explained that this group of Hebrew Israelites that the world knows of today stems from a foundation of Masonic influence that created them at the same time slavery was ending in the United States. They became the face of the truth and a deterrence to all that would truly desire to live in it. Now, in that video, I made statements and made claims that I did not prove. And that is not what I do in this ministry. That was a mere introduction to the truth. What I want to do right now is go over the history of the Hebrew Israelites so that the truth can finally have its day. So we're going to discuss the history. Let's begin. So to start in understanding the Israelites, we must go back in time and understand how we have gotten to where we are at in this present day. Going back in time through history, as all these Masonic wars were had from the American Revolution to the Civil War to World War I, what is not normally noted is the religious changes that were influenced by the Masons as well. There were many different religious movements that were established and groomed in order that confusion and separation was able to be created. You know, people often praise the United States for their laws around freedom of religion. But most people do not understand this law about freedom of religion was all about creating the mindsets that promoted division and more satanic free thought that ultimately leads to Satan. After the Civil War, you will find the creation of many different religious denominations, all within Christianity. Denominations like Jehovah's Witnesses, the African Methodist Episcopalian, the AME Church, the Mormons, etc. Many different denominations created by Freemasons. All these movements and denominations were about setting the foundation of Freemasonic thought into religion and blending it all into the religion of Christianity that led to confusion and separation, which is exactly why there are so many different denominations surrounding the religion of Christianity today. Most of us today only see what religion is like today. For instance, the Jehovah's Witnesses. They are very firm on their beliefs and they believe that they are living in the truth. But they do not incorporate their foundational history being founded by Charles Taze Russell, a known Freemason. Their foundations stem from him. But because time has separated them from him and his influence, all you have are his ideas and very little about his foundation. I mean, if you even bring up his Masonic influence with them, they will argue about it or just ignore it. But he, just like many others during that period, were just Freemasons that were used to create their own divisions in their own sects within Christianity. And all this was a result of what was happening before and after the Civil War during the 19th century. But unfortunately, in regards to the masses, this is a point that is highly overlooked. You see, the Masons were spreading their Masonic light through religion and the churches, and they had ministers who were teaching their version of the truth that was all about setting the foundation of the religions that we have today. It should be noted that the slaves were not freed until Masons had their influence within the Negro slave community, which is what Prince Hall Freemasonry is. You see, the slaves, they were not free until these Masonic rulers had their hooks into a selected few. Slaves were not free until they had Masonic leaders that were able to control them, and they had the slaves attached to the religion of Christianity. And this is precisely how the Black Negro Church was established. They never let the slaves free until they had them bound into their religion and Masonic control. And again, this is precisely how the Black Negro Church was established. And in the midst of that, just like in the other churches in America, other sects in the Negro churches were founded. And this is how the Hebrew Israelites came into existence. And you will find decades after, this is how the Nation of Islam came to be. And their establishment came up based upon the same Masonic foundation. But that's another story. To understand the Hebrew Israelites, it's important to understand the history. As I said, they did not just spring up out of nowhere. They are a result of influence that has spanned since the ending of the Civil War. As you research these groups, you can break down their influence by time periods or segments or waves. The first segment or period we can know as the birth of the belief. It came post-Civil War at the end of slavery. It emerged from the holiness churches at the end of the 19th century. You see, the holiness movement refers to the Methodist Church, primarily. The holiness movement originated in the first half of the 19th century in the United States as a renewal movement. It was rooted in Wesleyan Methodism, which emphasized sanctification and a second work of grace after conversion, leading to the formation of various denominations and a broader influence on American Protestants. The holiness movement emerged within Protestant churches, including some Baptist congregations, though it initially gained traction with the Methodists. Many Negro slaves were attached to the holiness movement, and they attached many slave traditions along with Masonic symbolism, as well as several other sources to create racially mixed congregations. You see, the birth of the Hebrew Israelites starts from this segment from the holiness movement in the Baptist church. And then all the following segments of the Hebrew Israelites were influenced by this initial segment. This is the segment most forgotten and ignored, but it is the foundation. Now, the second segment emerged in the post-World War I era of New York. It was comprised of the rabbinic Ethiopian Hebrew movement, which was often led by Caribbean immigrants. And it incorporated movements of Freemason Marcus Garvey, and it was also a part of the New Thought movement, which was incorporating New Age principles in their theology. The New Thought movement is a spiritual movement that began in the United States in the 19th century. It encouraged people to use the power of their thoughts to achieve a better life. Again, this goes back to what I discussed earlier about the different movements that sprang up during the period of the Civil War. When understanding this segment, it's important to know that this era is where the movement towards cultural nationalism began to be embraced, hence the acceptance of Garvey's movement. The next wave, which was the third, consisted of the Black Power generation, which grew up largely in and around Chicago in the Midwest. This was strongly Black nationalist, Afrocentric, literary, and influenced by the Nation of Islam. And the last segment is what we see today. These consist of the new groups that have emerged largely from New York, mostly from the One West camp, and they are predominantly what people refer to as Black Hebrew Israelites. When someone refers to the Hebrew Israelites, this is what they mostly are referring to. Now, in understanding the Israelites, what everyone does is talk about them in this modern time. But again, it's not possible to really understand them when looking at them today, because as I have repeatedly stated, they are surrounded around much truth, but they are also surrounded by falsehoods that taint the truth. It is all because of the foundation of how the sect of Israelites that we see today have started and were created. So let's begin to deal with it. When you speak to the Israelites, just like Jehovah's Witnesses are ignorant of the Masonic connection of their founders, the majority of Israelites are unaware of it as well. They are just a part of groups that have leadership that they follow. The Hebrew Israelites should not be summed up by their doctrines, but summed up by their leaders who they follow. And this is precisely the issue. Now, I will speak more about this soon because the Israelite sects that we all know of today, they are not a part of the Dry Bones Awakening. They are a part of a Masonic awakening that attaches them to a different goal than what our Father intends. They want to be recognized in this country, instead of understanding that this truth will never be recognized. There are goals of the Israelites that have nothing to do with what our Father says, because they are not actually tied to our Father. And it's important that everyone understands the mindsets and the goals of these leaders that they are attaching to and following, and make sure that these goals are aligned biblically to our Father. Now, I understand that most Israelites would disagree with what I just said here, and they would just initially argue about me not understanding what their goals are. I will revisit this accusation that I made later to make sure that what I have said is grounded in truth. The point that I am making is that there is a Masonic foundation that the Hebrew Israelites are tied to, and it's important that this Masonic foundation is understood. So let's understand more of that history. There are two individuals acknowledged as the effective founders of the Hebrew Israelites, and then there's a third that also had great influence. Those two, though, are William Christian and William S. Crowdy. They shared a great deal of similarities. They were both born enslaved in the American South. They were both previously active in the Baptist Church, and they were both committed Prince Hall Freemasons. They both established churches which quickly reached across the United States and even outside of it, churches that still exist to this day. Despite this, there are differences between them, and there is no record of the two meeting or acknowledging each other. So, as I alluded to in part 1 of this topic, because Satan knew Bible prophecy as he was creating confusion with the other religious denominations that he created, he did not just leave the truth alone. He used men that were sold out to him through Masonic oaths and used these men to give them the truth, but it was tainted. From the beginning that the Hebrew Israelites were created in America, it was established based off a false foundation. It's important to understand that Satan doesn't always just use lies. He is most effective by using truths, but then right before you get to the finish line, he detours away to lead people into a direction that leads to him. It's subtle, and if you're not already grounded in the truth, it can often be hard to discern. And you see, this is why these groups are so adamant about their standings, and it's why they use mainstream Christians as their justification of truth. For instance, with Jehovah's Witnesses, they use the ignorance of Christians that celebrate pagan holidays and that fight for them. They use this as a justification of them living in the truth. Because that issue that they're holding up is more biblically aligned than Christians, so to them it justifies that they are in the right place. And then what Satan does is, after they are solidified that they're in the right direction, he then attaches other doctrines that leads them to him, like the 144,000 being these elders. A complete fabrication of the truth, but it always will lead them back to him. It's a slight detour that leads them to other falsehoods that leads them to a false destination. And this is the case with all these other denominations that were created. And this is the same for the Israelites. They were taught from a foundation that contained truth, but their Masonic system doesn't allow them to be led fully into the truth. The foundation was tainted, but it also contained truth. But because these people engage with Christians who are also compromised, but they don't ever want to admit it, the pride Christians live in just justifies the existence of the Hebrew Israelites, because these Christians won't even try to acknowledge the truths that the Israelites represent. You see, if you're in the truth, then your truth should be able to be scrutinized, and you should be able to deal with the challenges and be able to explain why you are still in the truth. But what most of these sects do is they validate themselves by the ignorance of others, and this ignorance is primarily found within the pride of Christians. So let's be clear here. The first Hebrew Israelites in America were given their understanding through Freemasonry. The true awakening of the dry bones that was prophesied of comes through Yahuwah, breathing life back into us. This is what is prophesied of in Ezekiel chapter 37. Thus says Yahuwah Elohim to these bones, surely I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. I will put sinews on you and bring flesh upon you, cover you with skin and put breath in you, and you shall live. Then you shall know that I am Yahuwah. Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 5 through 6. You must be clear and understand that this is not what happened in the 19th century when the Hebrew Israelites were established. This group was not awakened by Yahuwah, but awakened by Freemasons. I often truly wonder if at certain degrees, Masons are truly told who the Negroes really are. But because of their oaths and their hatred of Yahuwah and Yahusha, they don't actually care. And so they help the enemy keep us blinded so that they can receive certain benefits. I don't know this for sure, obviously, but many times I feel like this, because these people keep talking like they know who we are.
You probably wonder, why do white people pay so much attention to black people if they don't like them? I don't pay attention to things I don't like.
What's the answer?
The liar knows what lie he told. You see what I'm saying? So even if I made it deceitful and I made you think that the answer is over here, but the answer is really over here, I'm still going to be looking over here. Me, the one that tricked, because I know this is the right answer. Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity.
That's why these writers kept writing written by himself, written by herself, Phyllis Wheatley, Frederick, because they thought Negroes couldn't read and write. They thought Negroes didn't have the capacity to read and write. And yet they made all the laws to stop us from learning how to do what? Read and write. If we can't read and write, what you trying so hard to stop us for? And the answer is because America has always known what you are. America has always known who you are. America has understood what you're capable of, and they will make you think you ain't nothing at the same time that they exploit your gifts. They'll tell you you lazy and make you a slave. They'll tell you you dirty and have you clean their house. They'll tell you you uncivilized, and we raise their children. They know who you are. But it's time that you listen to who you are, that you understand who you are.
I truly believe that these people know who we are, but they hate Yah, and they're the ones charged to keep us from ever waking up. Because why do these people keep talking about knowing who we are, but they never speak about it? Anyways, the current groups and camps today that we know are the Hebrew Israelites, the foundation that they were built upon stems from Freemasonry, which is why they understand our Father through hate, and they are unable to see it. So let me get back to their history. Again, the founding members of the Israelites were William Christian and William S. Crowdy, both former slaves made Prince Hall Masons who were the foundation of the Israel camp's beliefs. So let's keep going so I can prove it. We'll first deal with William Christian, 1856 to 1928. He was a Baptist minister. He was first born in Mississippi, but preached in Arkansas. In 1888, he claimed to have received a revelation, and in 1889, he established the Church of the Living God, Christian Workers for Fellowship. And he started teaching that the Israelites were black and African Americans were their descendants. You have to really understand this. These men were former slaves. They were only taught the Christian religion by their slave masters. Then after they were freed, many who were controlled by the slave masters were allowed to become Christian ministers, and some of them became Prince Hall Masons, aligning themselves under the American part of the Masonic mission to spread the light of Lucifer. And this is how this awakening occurred. Again, it was not Yahweh awakening his children. It was Satan getting ahead of the dry bones awakening. As Pentecostalism began to spread across the United States, by 1906, Minister Christian had established 68 branches across the South and the Midwest, which counted 4,276 members. This was a big deal at that time, and it should be understood that this is also how Prince Hall Masonry began to be spread as well. In its peak in 1926, Minister Christian's Church of the Living God organization had 239 churches and 17,402 members. His teachings were described as bearing three central themes: the origins of the black race, Christian racial harmony, and select terminology reflecting some Ethiopianism and Masonic influence. Okay, the next one we'll discuss, like I said, was William S. Crowdy. William Saunders Crowdy, 1847 to 1908, born in Maryland, he worked as a cook and served as a Baptist deacon in Oklahoma for 25 years before he received a series of visions in 1893. This is 5 years after William Christian. Crowdy began preaching across the Midwest. He founded the first tabernacle of his church organization, Church of God and Saints of Christ. This was in Kansas in 1896. Just like Minister Christian's, his message spread quickly, again because he also traveled extensively, seeding new branches. His organization, Church of God and Saints of Christ, continued to grow after his death, and by 1936 it counted 213 tabernacles in 27 states with 37,084 members. Many small businesses were founded from within this church organization. You see, both Crowdy and Christian were fundamentally Christian in nature. Their rituals, their theology, the way that they worshiped, their terminology were all drawn from the AME church. It's known as the Baptist Holiness Tradition, but it also stems from the Methodist Church, which was established by Prince Hall Freemason Richard Allen. Christian and Crowdy shared a message of anti-racist unity, their churches being home to mixed congregations of black and white members during the time of Jim Crow legislation. They held that not only African Americans, but Native Americans and Asians were also lost Israelite tribes. All of their ideas were given to them through their Masonic associations. They were basically told that the minorities that they knew in America that were not white, they were all lost Israelites, and this foundation of this message is important to understand as we get closer to understanding the doctrinal beliefs of the Israelites today, because they have a chart that they hold to. So let's keep discussing these men. 7 years after receiving his revelation, Christian published a book. It's called Poor Pilgrim's Work in the Name of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost on Christian Friendship Works, written in 1896. The preface opens with the statement, Freemason religion is the true mode of all religion. All other modes of religion are not worth 1 cent. Now look, I have attached a PDF to this book in the description box in case anyone wants to read it on their own. In this book, Christian, he goes on to assert a distinct racial code, drawing a straight line from Adam to Christ, all of whom were, of course, black, and he identifies blacks as black Jews or Ethiopians. And you see, this is how you know that it's Masonic thought and falsehoods that are put into here. I mean, because this all goes back to the same Masonic foundation as the Divine Nine group, Alpha Phi Alpha. This is the same type of thought attached to their rituals, as they call themselves Ethiopians. You can tell that this was not the thought based upon some kind of knowledge from Yahuwah, but from Freemasonry. Because first off, if he understood that they were black Jews, then he would know that that would make absolutely no sense to be calling them Ethiopians. It makes absolutely no sense. But you also see the Masonic thought because he was attached to the same indoctrinated racist view that they established and promoted. He was using white and black as color code for our skin color based upon their Masonic doctrines. The crazy part that I think should be understood is that if you read through his writing though he clearly boasts about Freemasonry, like I just read before, his doctrines are very much aligned to today's mainstream Christian churches. So those in mainstream Christianity really need to observe and ask themselves, why are their doctrines so attached to Masonic thought? Again, his book is in the description box. So that's dealing with the first two founders of the Hebrew Israelites in America, Christian and Crowdy. But there's a third figure. This third figure we must note during this foundational period is Frank S. Cherry, 1868 to 1963. A lot less is known about him than Christian and Crowdy. He claimed to have founded his Church of the Living God, the pillar ground of truth for all nations. He claimed he founded this church in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1886, although there are no independent records of this. What we do know is that the church appears first in Philadelphia in 1915. Now, based on research, it seems that Cherry was likely influenced by Crowdy, but he never admitted this. But his church was always distinctly independent. The reason why we can make this connection is because Crowdy, he lived in and ran his church from Philadelphia from 1899 until 1903. And the headquarters remained there and were maintained by the Crowdy Plummer faction after his death until 1917, when they relocated to Virginia. So it's obvious that many would have heard him preach there. Now look, Frank Cherry, of course, he was also a 33rd degree Prince Hall Freemason. He held a developed eschatology which predicted the year 2000 as the end of the Gentile age. This was the third 2,000-year period of creation. And what follows is the beginning of the 7th millennium, the Sabbath era. This is important to note because obviously after this timeline that he predicted did not come through, this is how the current Hebrew Israelites of today came into existence. And you see, it was from these three Prince Hall Freemason men, William Christian, 1856 to 1928, William Saunders Crowdy, 1847 to 1908, and Frank S. Cherry, 1868 to 1963. These three men are the beginning foundation of the Hebrew Israelite camps. They were all Prince Hall Mason Christian pastors that were taught about the identity of the Negroes in America, and they became the foundation that the sect of Hebrew Israelites in this world are based from. These three men right here. The churches established by these three men still exist to this day. Now, let's be clear that it's not like the current Israelite groups don't know of these men. I'm not just making this up on my own. I mean, on the website of the IUIC, as they go over the history of the Hebrew Israelites, you will note that as they speak about the history of the Hebrew Israelite movement, they highlight these men and others that I will be speaking about later. But as you read what they write about them, there is an important detail that is noticeably missing from that history, and that is the Masonic connection. You see, there is an editing of truth. And as I go through the history, you will see that they know of these men, but they ignored their Masonic connection. It's called truth that's edited. What I'm trying to explain to you here is that there is a Masonic connection and history that is completely ignored. And as you understand what it is I am presenting, you must understand why that is. I mean, why is Freemasonry being ignored? Why is the influence of Freemasonry ignored within these camps if they are really teaching the truth? I mean, they can speak about all these other topics, but the Masonic connections that link all these men together with the goals of the same Europeans that they speak against, this connection, this is what they want to ignore and not explain, even though it's probably the biggest link and connection within this modern society today. Freemasonry is the link that connects all these things together, and it's ignored within these camps. Why? Everyone plays a role in it while they conceal their intentions. And listen, I'm just getting started exposing the Masonic connections. As you go down the list in the history, Freemasonry does not go away. But as they speak about the history and note these men for their influence to the Hebrew Israelite movement, they completely ignore their Masonic connection. Listen, I understand what people do when these kind of things are brought up. They want to go to quick defense. So listen, if you want to speak against me, that's your choice. But you should really ask yourself, why is it me that's exposing the Masonic connections and not the leaders of these camps? This is not just a minor detail. It's extremely major. Why is it me exposing them and not these men? You see, here's the deal. If they know about the Masonic connection and they just chose to ignore it when speaking about the history, then they're compromised. But if they don't know, then they're just following other men. They're followers. Either way, what I'm trying to show you is that this history is not a secret. They show it themselves on their own display of history while they provide their edited version of the truth. It's truth edited. But let me keep going. We will continue to discuss the beginning founders of the Israelites. I just wanted to make sure that I show you that it's not something that's secret and not hidden about the history. Let's keep going. Again, like I said, the churches of these three men still are in existence to this day. This is Christian's Church of the Living God. This is the website right here. It has shrunk, but it is still present as basically a Pentecostal denomination with membership estimated at 40,000. Now, Crowdy's church, it remains probably the largest Black Hebrew Israelite congregation, although it's split into several factions after his death. There currently exist at least 5 distinct organizations claiming linear descent from his establishment. The first faction, the COGA SOC, descending from Grove's faction, that's this website right here, and the Temple Beth El from the Crowdy line, which is on this website right here. This is the largest and most obvious, the latter having branches in several African states as well as Cuba and Jamaica. There is a great deal of history that Temple Beth El has in regards to their history. They refer to Crowdy as a prophet. He is known as Prophet Crowdy. As you go through many of the leaders in the history of this church, you will see their ties to Prince Hall Masonry to this day. For instance, after Crowdy's son, the next person to take on the church was William Plummer. This man was so active in Masonic circles that he has a Prince Hall Lodge named after him. William H. Plummer, Lodge number 271. I mean, there's so much history on their website that they provide about this organization, but yet, as you read about it, their Masonic influence is completely ignored and never mentioned. You must understand, this is the norm within all of Christianity. You'll find that there is Masonic influence all around, but they act like it's not there, and they act as if the leadership's Masonic affiliations are inconsequential. And lastly, this is Cherry's Church. Cherry's Church still exists at 2132 Nicholas Street in Philadelphia. It does not have a website, but even on the building, you can see the Masonic influence as they have that satanic star sitting right on the church. So let's tie it all together. You see, these are all basically Christian churches that had some Israelite theology of what they referenced as Judaism. Those outside of these groups refer to them as Judaic Christianity. There were many different doctrines associated, many similar to mainstream teachings found in Christianity. But there was also the influence of who the Israelites were, but it was still Christianity at the core. You must understand this is how the foundation of all the denominations that grew after the Civil War is what the foundation was based upon. The most important thing to understand is that this first generation of Hebrew Israelites were Freemasons. This has been documented for Christian, Crowdy, and Cherry. You see, the Masonic foundations of the Hebrew Israelites is easy to note, but this needs to be understood that this does not give credibility to the rest of the Negro church in America, because much of the rest of the Negro church, the black church in America, is also built from Masonic foundations. This is the problem with religion as a whole, but I am right now just speaking in reference to the Hebrew Israelites. So let's be clear on that, in case someone wants to justify the black Negro church, because it also has a great deal of Masonic influence as well. Anyways, this right here is the foundation of the first wave of the Hebrew Israelites. It was founded based upon the influence of Freemasons. Now listen, I'm sure to those that are in the camps today, this information, to them, it means very little, because many people don't care about the foundation. They care about what they are about today. Most don't care about the history. For instance, when I speak to many Christians about the reasons for rejection of the religion of Christianity because of the influence of the early church fathers, most Christians, they want to ignore that influence because they want to believe that what they know now is the truth. For many Israelites, it's the same exact thing. They don't want to understand the foundation of the Masonic influence because of the leaders that they follow today. But after we continue on with this history, the connections will be much easier to understand. So I'm going to stop here in the history, and I will conclude this history in the next part. What I wanted to be understood is the foundation that the Hebrew Israelites stem from, and it has nothing to do with Bible prophecy, specifically the prophecy of the awakening of the dry bones. These are organizations of men teaching a form of the truth in order to be the main influencers of this movement before the dry bones prophecy was fulfilled. The foundation is important, and that's why in this day and age, it's important that if you join any organization or group, you must really look into the beginning of it and how it has come to be. Knowledge is not something that is privy to an organization. Understanding is not something that is only held by a certain group of people. Whenever you begin to go in that direction, this is where actual cults begin to form, because people believe that this knowledge is only attainable from this group. These groups were formed because they were the only people at this time giving people something different than what the churches were giving them. Because it came right from the Bible, it was able to entice them. But this is where these groups come from and how cults always form, because they start with the truth, but then they make themselves the only source of this truth, which then leads to idolatry upon the leaders and people believing that the only way that they can be a part of the truth is by being a part of these groups. It leads to reliance upon the leadership and organization, which is exactly how cults are built. The truth is that our Father's kingdom is not going to grow because of the power of these organizations that have sprouted up. Our Father is not looking for a particular organization and say, "It is you that I am all taking back." No, the truth is Yahuwah has a remnant scattered amongst the world, and it does not have anything to do with the religion that you're tied to or the group or organization that you're a part of. People think because they call themselves a Christian, this is what is important, or because you joined an Israelite camp, you're fully in the truth now. Absolutely not. When you dig deep into these religions, you can always find the influence of Satan. With Christianity, when you dig deep, you find the religion of Christianity is built upon by the early church fathers who were pagan Gentiles who attached to many ideas about the Hebrew Messiah, but they did not attach to the full faith of the Yahudim who spread it. They were tares that our Messiah prophesied of. But on the flip side, when you look at the Hebrew Israelites, you see that their awakening did not happen because of the power of the Most High, but it was the influence of Prince Hall Freemasonry within the Negroes who were recruited during and after slavery. But I have not finished that history, so there may still be some rejection of this. Listen, our Messiah explained how the kingdom of heaven would grow. He says, in another parable he spoke to them, "The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till it was all leavened." That's Matthew chapter 13, verse 33. When understanding this parable, I want you to think about a woman breaking bread. She kneads the dough and then puts it away until later the yeast has raised the dough tremendously. Yahusha is saying that this is how the kingdom of heaven is. Other groups and organizations grow by adding influence or using man-made power and wisdom from men. But Yah's kingdom, the leaven or the yeast, it will grow internally through its own power, which in the case of the kingdom of heaven is the Holy Spirit. The kingdom of heaven, those of us who will inherit this world, We are growing the numbers of the kingdom by the power of the Holy Spirit. It has absolutely nothing to do with the power of an organization and its influence. And I assure you that it has nothing to do with the influence of Freemasonry. So when you see the foundation of an organization can be traced back to a Freemason, you should leave that group. The knowledge of who we are has nothing to do with these groups of the Israelites, but they have been put forth in order to be the face of this truth. I have never sat under an Israelite camp. They have never had one thing to do with my understanding or growth in the knowledge of Yahuwah. Yahuwah prophesied how this would happen. He said, "And Yahuwah will scatter you among the peoples, and you will be left few in number among the nations where Yahuwah will drive you. And there you will serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. But from there you will seek Yahuwah your Elohim, and you will find him if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. When you are in distress and all these things come upon you in the latter days, when you turn to Yahuwah your Elohim and obey his voice. For Yahuwah your Elohim is a merciful El. He will not forsake you nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers which he swore to them." Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 27 through 31. And you see, this is what happened with the dry bones. The remnant who Yah is waking up. It is because we are seeking after him. There are many that he has spoken directly to us and told us who we are. It's because we're seeking after him. Now, that's not to say that there won't be groups or individuals that can help you with this. Of course there will be. But you have to be careful when these groups claim to be the only source of that truth and your only access to it. And this is what the Hebrew Israelite camps are.
The prophecy. Hold on, brother. Before we get to the prophecy, I want us to go through what the church, I don't want to call it the church, the nation or the movement, IUIC. Can I call it the church?
Yes, we're the real church.
Okay.
We're the only church according to the Bible.
The IUIC church has been...
You don't need to be a part of any group to come into the kingdom. Yes, people can help you. You can learn things from others, absolutely. But Yahuwah has given us all his word, and if you read it diligently and seek him out through it daily, you don't need anyone else. If you are led by the Ruach HaKodesh, you allow him to lead you personally. You do not need an organization or an individual to lead you in the truth. People can be resources to you. They can be a help to you, but they are not your source of truth. And this is the problem with the Hebrew Israelite camps. The Hebrew Israelite camps depend upon their leadership, and it's a hierarchy, and it all goes back down to the main leader of the group with each Hebrew Israelite camp. And that is the problem with these groups, because you will find that these groups will tell you that you need to be under someone in order to know our Father, and that's not true. Yahuwah said, if we seek him with all our heart and all our soul, we will find him. Not if we seek and find the right group or organization, we will find him. If we seek him with our whole heart, we will find him. I will finish up this history of the Hebrew Israelites in part 3 so that this history is made clear. Until then, please study the word on your own and read it diligently. Live in the truth, and it's the truth that will set you free. Not me, not any other group, but the truth, because it comes from our Heavenly Father. So please, continue to seek him and understand, if you do this, you will find him. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like this and share this with others. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Also, please don't forget to like this and follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I would like to thank all who bless this ministry. Thank you for your love and your support and contributions. They are a true blessing, and you have no idea how much of a blessing you are to this ministry. Thank you for following the call Yah has placed on your heart. Be blessed. Okay, thanks again for watching, everyone. I love you all.